Oh, hello! My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Okay, so it is the morning time, and it is time for me to wrap up my October reading month. I am drinking some Bones coffee, which Leanna from Leanna's Library has gotten me hooked on. Well, it's like a chain of addiction. She got Bethany at Beautifully Bookish Bethany to try it, and then both of them were raving, so I've tried it, and like, it's just real good. Leanna should be getting a commission. But anyway, it's the morning for me, and when you're seeing this, it's probably the morning for you, so good morning. October was like a pretty good reading month for me. I guess, like, I got through a lot, which was good. It felt, there's a lot of meh books in the mix. And I did have a couple of, like, pretty good hits, but, like, I would say I had more, like, mediocre to lows than I did highs, which bears out in the reading stats. We'll get to that in a second. But anyway, I definitely have some things I want to talk about, but in terms of, like, did this feel like a particularly awesome reading month? No. The only thing that I would say is I enjoyed getting back. I've been much more into my mood reading, so that's been good. And I also, because it was October and in the fall, I do tend to read a lot of mysteries, and like, it's just been fun kind of falling back in love with mysteries and finding, as we will talk about, kind of some new subgenres that I hadn't really explored before, and now I'm like, ooh, like this is a whole kind of new world for me to get into. So anyway, let's do some stats and then we'll talk about my hits, my disappointments, and my surprises. Okay, as you can see, it has been a very prolific reading month for me. I did read 26 books. Now, a lot of that, well, actually not as much as I thought. I was gonna say, I thought like a lot of that was subscription, me trying to get through my Kindle Unlimited trash because I let my membership expire in the middle of the month. Only 5. Okay, so yeah, let me retract that statement. Not a lot, but some were me reading some very short Kindle Unlimited trash. So that was part of the volume. But yeah, actually, mostly from my TBR, a few from my library. I have kind of like pumped the brakes on requesting so much from the library, which I think has been good. That has been good for me, enjoying, or like at least not feeling pressure about reading, which is something I've been working on with myself. Not very much audio, just a couple of those, a few physical and mostly ebook. I'd say that's pretty typical for me. As I mentioned, I did read a lot of mystery this month. I would say of those 26, maybe half were mysteries, which is a lot. I did read some genre benders, so like urban fantasy type things or paranormal romance or whatever. Generally some romance, a couple of nonfiction things, one historical fiction, which is actually my first historical fiction of the year. I don't think I have it listed to talk about, but The Phantom Tree by Nicola and Cornik. I mean, I guess it does have time travel in it, but it's mostly, I think of it as historical fiction. And yeah, it was good, but I'm surprised I've not read more of that this year. And then also a few novellas or short story collections. In terms of total pages, pretty average. It looks like about 300 pages was my average book length, so yeah, 7,600 should be about right. Average age of the books was 7 years. I'm trying to bump that up because I'm really trying to focus more on backlist. Like, that's going to be one of my goals for next year, is to focus much more on backlist. Average time on TBR, I'm glad that has decreased. My goal is to have that average be 3 months, which is rare. That rarely happens because I let books sit on my TBR for so long. But that's closer to my goal. And then yeah, as I mentioned, average rating 3.06. So if you'll remember, if you watch these videos, 3 for me means a book that met my expectations. There wasn't anything great about it. There wasn't anything terrible about it. It just was like perfectly fine, perfectly enjoyable. It's like a B. It like did what it met expectations. It did what it was supposed to do. So for that to be my rating, like that sounds right. I don't feel like I had a lot of huge hits this month. As you can see in the distribution, I did have one reread that I'm including that I gave 5 stars to, just because I bumped it up from a 4-star. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, in general, for the new books I read, the highest rating I gave was 4 stars. So yeah, not, I would say, an amazing reading month in terms of ratings, but I think overall a productive one. And I really, like I said, was enjoying getting back into more mysteries. Okay, let's start with the disappointments and work our way up. I did have a lot of disappointments. I think I had 5 I wanted to talk to you guys about this month, so let's start with the ones I have in physical form. First one here is Angel's Fall by Nora Roberts. This is a disappointment, not because it was terrible. I think I either gave this a 2.5 or a 3-star, but because I usually can count on Nora Roberts to give me the standalone suspense, light suspense that I like, and this one just didn't work for me. She really likes having these heroines who are like, kind of like independent, and sometimes to the point where they're just annoying, and I think that's where this fell. Really what it can sometimes be, I guess, is like a little bit manic pixie dream girl, and I just like wasn't as into that. Yeah, this one didn't work for me, and because I usually love her books like this so much, that was very disappointing. Another disappointment is Roseblood by A.G. Howard. I wouldn't say this is a surprising disappointment, but it was disappointing nonetheless because I do really like Phantom of the Opera, and I was excited to experience a retelling. This just was bad. I have a whole reading blog on that. You can watch it for my full thoughts, but yeah, this was not a good book, and it was definitely disappointing. Another disappointment that was the most disappointing, but I'm not going to talk about it that much right now because I'm doing like a whole reading vlog and it's a part of it, was Passenger to Frankfurt by Agatha Christie. This was, I gave it a 1.5 star, which is unprecedented for me for Agatha Christie, and it's a bad book. It's not good, and I was very disappointed because I've never, even bad books from Agatha Christie, I generally still enjoy on some level, and this is the first Agatha Christie I've ever read where I did not even enjoy it. Like, there was really very little that was redeeming about it for me. So you'll see my full thoughts when I do. It's a part of my lowest rated Goodreads TBR challenge that I'm doing. So I did some vlogging of that, so you'll see more details there, but just know that that was unquestionably my most disappointing book this month, and it was like bad, and I'm sad because I never thought I would have a bad time reading an Agatha Christie book, and like, here it is, I found it. Something else that is in the mystery category that was a disappointment for me, and this wasn't terrible. I gave this 3 stars, and I will continue to try with this author. I didn't love it the way I was hoping I might, and that was Pieces of Her by Karin Slaughter. This was my first Karin Slaughter book. Again, it wasn't bad, and I did enjoy it. I thought it had some pacing issues. I thought that the conclusion of it was a little like essentially the solution to this mystery is just kind of ridiculous. I don't know. I didn't love it the way that I think a lot of people apparently really love her. Now, I have another book from her called, I think, A Cold Faint Fear, maybe, that I got picked up at the used bookstore. I will continue to try her. I think that she just didn't end up becoming someone that I was like, yes, I absolutely love this author, I'll read anything from her. Like, I think it'll be more of a, I'm gonna continue to keep my eye on her. When she has a book that has a description that's interesting to me, I very well may pick it up. I think the other thing I didn't like, I felt like she was a little old man get off my lawn-ish about millennials, and like, it just like 1,000 memes on Twitter about like the boomers or the Xers versus the millennials in terms of like why there has been a failure to launch for a lot of millennials. It felt a little tone deaf and a little just like, this isn't, like, I think you think you're making a point here, and like, it just, for this millennial, did not connect. And then my final disappointment was, I think this book is called Vampires Like It Hot by Lynsey Sands, and it was disappointing because it was like one of the worst Argento vampire books that she's written in a while. I think she was trying to subvert some tropes and some expectations in terms of like abusive behavior and like a fated mate trope. I just don't think it came off very well, and I think that this book officially is going to demote the Argento vampire books from read them when they first come out to like see what the description is. If it sounds like tropes you might like, go ahead and read it when it becomes available at the library. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying like I'm done with this series forever, but like it's off of my I'm keeping up with it list, I think, officially at this point, because this is 2 in a row that I've had a real problem with. And it's also, I think this was like the 28th book. Like, there have been plenty. It's not like I'm hurting for, like, I've had fun in this world. I don't need to feel bad about like maybe pushing the brakes and not having to keep up with it. And I was disappointed because that's some of my very favorite brain candy is those books. That and her Highlander series. Lynsey Sands basically just writes very light and kind of like comedic romances in terms of like her authorial voice tends to not take itself too seriously. It's sort of campy, and I really like that. So anyway, I think this book I'm gonna put on hold. I still am enjoying her Highlander books when they come out, so like I still have some good Lynsey Sands series for me to keep up with. Moving into surprises, these were all like hits in the sense of I really enjoyed them. They were doing something in their subgenre that I really enjoyed. The first is I read Touch of Red by Laura Griffin. Now, I got this as a recommendation from Smart Bitches Trashy Books' Insta stories. They do recommendation Wednesdays every week, which are really, like, they're doing a good job. And a side note, I would really like to do some version of a recommendation thing on Instagram. Let me know if you guys would be interested in that, because I just think it's fun, like, for people to give you a prompt and you have to come up with something. I don't know if I would be as good at it as they are, but anyway. So I got this, I said, I want something that will give me the vibes of a Nora Roberts standalone thriller. She recommended Touch of Red, this one in particular. Now, once I read this, I realized this is a part of a series. So it's not a standalone, but it can be read by itself. Like, you don't have to read the other ones. I am now going back and reading all of these. I've already read one because I got two at the used bookstore at the same time, and they're all available at my library. I really like this as what I'm going to describe as cozy thriller. This has all the vibes of like a small town romance slash like a cozy mystery set in a small town, but it's like following like a forensic lab and like all the people who pair off from the forensic lab. So you get some, like, there's like serial killers, there's like mysteries and whatever happening, like you get all of that, but it never is like super dark. And I didn't know that this was a subgenre, but it's perfect. Like, it's exactly what I like for this time of year. It feels very comfy. It's not super scary. It's not super dark or anything. And I really liked this. So I'm gonna, this is in the, I think it's called the Tracers. Yeah, it's the Tracers series. So I'm gonna go back to the beginning and start working my way to catch up with this, because I think this is the 12th and the most recent book. I think there'll be a new one next year. So I'm gonna catch up with this series. And then on a similar line, I also really enjoyed a book that I had requested and didn't realize was a part of a series, and didn't realize it was a series in this same subgenre, which was Death Is Not Enough by Karin Rose. Now, I will say I didn't like that. I think actually I ended up giving this 3.5 now that I'm looking at it. I gave both of them a 3.5. I probably didn't like Death Is Not Enough quite as much as this Tracer, the Laura Griffin one, because it was more, like, it could be read as a standalone, but it was so clear to me that there had been all these other couples, and like a lot of the book was you spending some time with couples who've already gotten together from previous books. So it didn't work quite as well as a standalone, but again, it has this like lightness of touch. It's a mob mystery kind of thing that's happening, and it just, I didn't know this was a subgenre, but it is, and I love it. And now, like, I have two series that I can catch up with and enjoy. They're even lighter than something like the In Death series from J.D. Robb, because actually I think that those books have a little bit of a grittier tone to them, which I enjoy because it's J.D. Robb / Nora Roberts, and she almost can do no wrong. There are some exceptions, as we talked about earlier. But anyway, I just really, this is going to be such a great addition to my mystery reading repertoire, and I'm really excited to have found this subgenre. I didn't really understand that this was a thing that exists, but I'm excited that it does. And I think that another person in this subgenre might be Karin Robards, and I have a few of her books on my TBR as well to catch up with. So, all that to say, surprised and delighted to find a subgenre that is not, I don't think ever, like, I think will rarely have like a 5-star book in it for me, or even a 4-star book, but something that's just like a great part of your everyday reading diet, at least for me. My other surprise was Escorted by Claire Kent. Now, this is a book that I've had in ebook form for a very long time. Claire Kent is the pseudonym for one of my favorite contemporary romance authors, Noelle Adams. And I had often seen it cited prior to The Kiss Quotient as, oh, this is the best sex worker and client trope romance that there is. I think The Kiss Quotient is better, but I will say that if you liked The Kiss Quotient and you are looking for another trope of sex worker to client romance that is not like wholly problematic, I would recommend this. It's it has more sex in it, I will say that, but I do think that the sex scenes are used to progress the emotional development between the two characters. I think that there is an interesting look at sort of the underlying reasons why the man who is the sex worker in this case, why he has chosen this path. I think interesting conflicts that come up, even though there's not a ton of it's not a book that has a lot of plot. It's a book that has a lot of like emotional and character development in it. So again, I don't think it's as good as The Kiss Quotient, but if you read that and like you're really looking for that trope, I think this is probably the second least problematic version of that trope I've encountered, because as I mentioned, I think when I talked about The Kiss Quotient, whenever I read it, I really liked it, but it is very hard for me to ever fully put away the like power dynamic issues at play. But again, this is another book that understands those issues and talks about them explicitly, which makes it a lot less icky for me. And I do just really like Noelle Adams' writing style. She's a very comfortable kind of read for me. And I also think she writes sex scenes that are more on the realistic end in romance, if that makes sense. It feels a lot less of like just a complete fantasy. It feels at least a little bit closer to reality. So it's a book that has a lot of sex scenes, so the fact that she writes them pretty well I think is an important thing to know. So anyway, just a shout out, a surprise for me to anybody who's looking for another book kind of like The Kiss Quotient in terms of the trope it's playing with. Okay, and then 4 things I wanted to talk about in terms of hits, and I'll start from like the least hit to the biggest hit. So the least hit, but something I wanted to shout out because I think that this is definitely in the top 5 best Kindle Unlimited smut that I've ever encountered in terms of writing quality, in terms of there actually being a fun plot, in terms of there actually being like a conflict and something that's sort of like a fun take on very worn out tropes. And that was Mating the Huntress by Talia Hibbert. This is the first Talia Hibbert I have read, and I really enjoyed this. Like, I just thought this was so cute because the premise is basically that there is this woman who comes from a family of hunters of werewolves, but she has never been allowed to participate because there's a prophecy that like trying to do it will break her heart or something. So, but she still like has trained and like is a woman about her shit. And then she is the fated mate of a werewolf who does not know that that's her family background. And so like she thinks that he is stalking her because he knows she's a hunter and he's trying to kill her. But he's actually just following her around because he has no social skills because like he's been raised in the woods basically, and he's trying to figure out how to like woo her. So like she's planning on killing him. He's like picked out her favorite cupcakes and invited her over for movie night. Like it's just really cute and fun and light. So if you're looking for some kind of like Kindle Unlimited light nonsense, I think that this is one of the better written ones I've ever encountered. And like I remember this was brought to my attention by Elise at Smart Bitches Trashy Books. It was the week of the whole Kavanaugh hearing of it all. And just like frankly the fact that like he only eats people if they're rapists like was just like enjoyable. It was a kick-ass woman, a beta hero who is like, yeah, I mean, sometimes I eat people, but only if they're rapists and only if I'm grumpy. Like, it just was a very cathartic read that week, and it was super cute. So I would definitely recommend that. I gave it 3 stars. It's not like amazing, but it was just like for its subgenre, I thought was very fun. Okay, then we have The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I can never say that last name right. It just feels weird in my mouth when I say it. Anyway, this book is good. I gave this 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It's a hit. I talked about in my What I'm Reading Right Now video just that I do think that there's some overhypage here. It's not as good as I was led to believe because I think that this has some like first novel writing problems to it. But it's a super cool premise. It's executed, I think, pretty well. And if you like isolated house mysteries, which is like my jam, like I would say that's probably my #1 mystery trope is some sort of like isolated house or like isolated school kind of setting. So like it has that, it has like it's genre bending for mystery, it's sort of paranormal, like it's a really interesting book. I think the execution isn't perfect, which is why it's not a 4.5 or 5-star book for me. 100% though, it's a 4-star book. I really love these tropes and I really enjoyed seeing them played with in this book. Would recommend. That being said, however, the book that I impulse bought last weekend, if you follow me on Instagram, you saw that I just like shamefully was like, fuck it, I'm tired of waiting for this at the library, I'm in the mood to read this today, I'm buying it, was An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena. Now, I actually, if somebody was asking me like, hey, what's a recent isolated house type mystery like that I can try, this would be what I would recommend over 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, just because it's shorter, which I like. I get impatient with books that I think have too much fluff in them. This has no fluff, this like gets to getting, and I appreciate that. It is isolated, snowed in inn. So it's strangers at this bed and breakfast, I think in like upstate New York, and they're all snowed in together. It plays with the whole like one person dies and then they're trying to figure out, like they all kind of are going crazy together, sort of in the tradition of something of like, and then there were none. So I enjoyed that piece of it. I liked the variety of the different types of characters. Now the reason this is a 4-star and not a 4.5 for me is for 2 reasons. One, I've gotten to the point where I've read enough mystery that I almost always can spot who did it. I don't always, actually rarely do I know why, but just like based on the tropes, I almost always know who did it. I did in this case, and then the why of it I think was a little obscure and like a little kind of a cheat. It didn't feel that satisfying to me. Like I still enjoyed the overall mystery and the progression of it. It just, I'll warn you that when you get to the why of who did it, you're gonna be a little like, so that knocked it down. And then also this is in present tense, and I just generally don't really like present tense in books. Like some types of stories I think you can get away with it, but in a mystery story I particularly was like, this is sort of a barrier for me to overcome. So for those reasons I gave it a 4 instead of a 4.5, but it is my favorite new book to me that I read this month, and I would definitely recommend this if you like mysteries, if you like these tropes. I think this is really fun. I like this author. Looking at the descriptions of her past work, they're more on the domestic thriller end of things, which is not usually my thing as much. So I may just be keeping an eye for her books coming forward and not necessarily going back, but I did think this was well written, and I really enjoyed this and would recommend it. And we get to my favorite thing I read this month. Now, I don't usually include rereads in these wrap-ups just because I reread a lot, and usually I don't have like a massively different experience with my rereads, but I've decided for things like this, I'm going to include them because some of the classics that I read when I was either in, like essentially before the age of 16. And so I think it is fair for me to re-rate them, reevaluate them as an adult reader as opposed to as a new reader or a teen reader. And Shirley Jackson I have always said is one of my favorite authors, especially her short story collections. Like, I love her short stories. She was very formative for me in terms of defining taste and defining my own voice as a writer. Not that like I'm published or whatever, but just like when I write short stories, her and Flannery O'Connor are probably like the most influential on the types of short stories I write and like my voice. So I knew that I loved Shirley Jackson, and I remembered really liking The Haunting of Hill House, but I reread it for a book club that I'm in at my local independent bookstore. And like, I had originally given this a 4-star, and I bumped this all the way up to a 5-star, and here is why. It's so good. I mean, that's the bottom line. So 5-star for me means it's an all-time favorite, and like, I remember when I first read this, I read this almost purely as an actual like supernatural book, like a horror novel, and like thinking that there were ghosts and all of that. And it completely works on that level. But this time, for whatever reason, I was reading it completely as having no supernatural elements in it and only being essentially like a horror novel because the person like you're following is going crazy. And it works just as well on that level, like just as well, and in my mind, maybe even better. This is such a, this is a novel of existential dread on the level of like Camus or Sartre. I mean, like this is just beautiful. It's a beautiful novel. It's so well written. Like, I'm a little like speechless trying to talk about this because I just love it in terms of like the actual writing. I think it is fascinating that she so successfully wrote something that can work with supernatural elements or without almost equally as well. It's just so well executed, and I so connected with Eleanor in this. I think some of this may have been driven by the fact that I recently lost my father, and the main character, Eleanor, essentially, I mean, I had a wonderful relationship with my father. I absolutely loved him, whatever. But like, she had a very difficult relationship with her mother. She was a caretaker for her mother. And so like, reading this essentially as like someone kind of going a little crazy because like they're in the throes of like grief or like loss, I think really connected with me on this reread. Anyway, all that to say, The Haunting of Hill House has been getting a lot of hype because of the Netflix adaptation. I tried to watch it and was just like so indignant that this is labeled The Haunting of Hill House because like plot-wise it's like the same elements, but like completely different plot. I think I'm gonna give it some space. I may watch it next year at Halloween, like when I've had some time. It's getting a lot of hype because of that, which is great. Like, I'm glad that people are re-remembering this book. I think that's why they picked it for our book club. And I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to revisit this as an adult. This also reminded me that, like, you guys will be seeing more about this, but like, I next year really want to focus on classics because like I enjoy them, and I've gotten so caught up in the front list of it all this year that like I've not been reading like things that I've been wanting to read for a very long time, or like rereading some things that I read as a teenager that I keep meaning to get back to. And this just reminded me that like that would be a very enjoyable and fruitful thing to do. So anyway, this was just like a huge hit for me. It really connected with me, like kind of I think where I'm at emotionally in my life right now, but it's also just amazingly well written. I would really recommend it if you've been seeing a lot of hype for it and it sounds appealing to you at all. I think it's like 150 pages or something. It's a very low time commitment. It is like a very short novel, and I think that you would have a response to it. Even if you ended up not liking it, I think that it would provoke a response in you. So in that sense, it's something I would pretty much recommend to anyone. Oh, actually, before I go, so I have been gaining a lot of subscribers, which is great. Like, hello, all you new people. I'm glad that you want to listen to me talk at all. But I'm actually gonna, I think, reach 2,000 subs a lot quicker than I thought I would. I will be doing a giveaway when that happens, so stay tuned for that. The thing I wanted to ask you guys is, do you guys have any thoughts about something you'd like me to do for that besides the giveaway? Like, I was thinking maybe I could do a video of some of my non-bookish favorites, like TV and music and stuff. Maybe that would be fun, or another Q&A, or maybe a live stream. Like, I don't know, if you guys have any thoughts about a good way to celebrate whenever I reach 2,000, assuming that I do, but based on how things are progressing, I think that will happen. Yeah, just let me know below if you have any thoughts about that. I'm definitely open to suggestions. Right now, I think I'm leaning towards doing a video with some of my non-bookish favorites, but like, definitely let me know if you have other ideas. And also, thank you. It's like, the more people who join me on this journey, the more fun it is, because like I meet new people and like get more interaction, and I don't know, it's just more like the more people who follow you, the more fun it is, basically, is what I've determined about YouTube. So thank you for being here, and let me know if you guys have thoughts about how to celebrate. My coffee's cold, so that probably means it's time for me to go. Like I said, this was sort of a mixed bag for me reading-wise this month, but I am very happy to report that I am damn near back to zero in terms of like ARCs and library books. Like, though I do have some ARCs that are for next year, but like the pressure situation has been alleviated, and in the last week or two I've really been able to get back into mood reading, and I can already tell how much I'm enjoying it and how excited it's making me to read. So that is something I'm really happy about. So I'm excited to see how November goes, and December, also December, because things will way slow down at work, and so I will have like a lot more time and energy to read. So anyway, that was how my October reading went. Definitely let me know how your month went, if it was a good one. If you have any major thoughts about any of the books I talked about, definitely let me know that in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!